And we are live with Thorsten Waloschek. He's the CEO of NeoPredics AG. He's also the owner of CCIAO, which is a medtech marketing and sales consulting company. NeoPredics is a pretty cool company. Basically, Thorsten made it its life purpose to making sure that every baby has the best possible start into life. So he was the CEO of NeoPredics AG. He leads a visionary digital health medtech company that develops predictive analytics for neonatal and maternal care applications. This podcast is presented to you by podper.com. If you want to get invited to 10 podcasts, my agency charges $150 per podcast appearances. We do that for a limited time. Normally, it's way more expensive, and we book you into podcast in your specific niche. So podfire.com or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn for that. Thorsten, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great. As you already said in the introduction, I made it my personal mission, making sure that every baby has the best possible start into life. I have no medical background, but I've been working in life sciences, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, medtech for the last 25 plus years. And the first time I came across a premature baby, a neonatal baby, actually, it was shortly after I had my first own daughter. I was just, I found my mission, honestly. And ever since, I only worked on projects in companies, started companies that align with that mission and making sure that every baby has the best possible start into life. And that's what I'm doing. And I love it. And it keeps me going, makes me getting up every morning and keeps me awake at night.
And tell me the market for that. What is the specific pain point in the market?
Well, first of all, people, especially in Europe, so I'm based in Germany, especially in Europe, premature birth is still a little bit of a taboo topic. We can talk when we meet at the bar or the first time we meet here now, not face to face, but online, we can talk about prostate cancer. We can talk about erectile dysfunction. We can talk about breast cancer. All of that is in public, and people are not really ashamed about talking about such topics. But premature birth, premature babies, that is still, especially in Europe, something that people don't talk about. Up to 10% of all babies. In Germany, it's about 8%. Other countries, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But in general, 8, 9, up to 10% of babies are born prematurely. But people don't talk about it. And this is something that is a pain point for the industry, for the medical community, and first and foremost for parents that are affected by premature birth, because the babies can't talk yet. So it's more about the parents. And this is one of the biggest pain points because it's not in the public eye, it's not in the public discussion. And that's why there's just little funding of startup companies like mine. But in general, you don't hear about it. And neonatologists, doctors, medical staff, affected parents, as I just said, are scrambling for resources, be it on the medical side, but also on the, let's say, more supporting side, because it is not being discussed in public. That's, I think, the biggest pain point. And besides that, because, of course, premature babies in general are very fragile. Running clinical trials, for example, on dedicated drugs for premature babies or babies in general are very, very difficult to finance, are very, very difficult to run because, well, getting parental consent and defining medical devices as well as pharmaceuticals for these very, very fragile patients is technically difficult.
Right. Big ethical concern as well. Like imagine your baby and your parents decided to make tests on you, like mom, dad, what's going on here? I mean,
Absolutely.
products safety might be established, but even then. So tell me about NeoPredics specifically, like what do you folks do?
Yes. So we are a software company, predictive analytics, software as a service. So we don't need to run tests or trials on babies. It's all about data. So from that point of view, that's a little easier. So what we are doing is we use the idea of AI and ML and all of these nice things that everybody's talking about, but with a focus on what we call early life. Early life is a definition from conception all the way through the second birthday. So unborn babies as well as newborn babies and very young children. That is our focus, and we want to support clinicians with predictive analytics, meaning giving them a glimpse of the future, telling them what will happen to what patients before symptoms occur. I give you one example. It's our first product that is already commercially available. It's bilirubin prediction. Bilirubin is the biomarker for neonatal jaundice. When the skin turns yellow, everybody heard about that. The skin turns yellow after birth. But at the time of discharge, it is very, very difficult for clinicians to identify babies who will be affected, because this neonatal jaundice kicks in 2, 3, 4 days after birth. And a term baby that has been born and mom and baby are happy and up and running might be discharged after 2 days from the delivery hospital. At this point of time, neonatal jaundice has not yet kicked in. We can, based on data that is being recorded and being measured for every newborn baby as long as it's born in the hospital, we don't need additional data points. Based on these data points, we can help clinicians to identify those babies that will develop neonatal jaundice in the next 1 or 2 days. We have a prediction period of 60 hours, 2.5 days. So at the time of discharge, we can help clinicians to identify those babies that will come back because of neonatal jaundice. And then we don't make suggestions, we don't make clinical decisions, we just give this piece of information to clinicians, and now they can make a decision whether they keep the baby in the hospital, whether they better prepare the parents that they absolutely have to come back within the next 2 days, and so on. That's what we are doing. That is a product that is already available. And now we are moving into maternal health, so pregnant women, working on preeclampsia prediction. And again, the idea is the same, helping clinicians to identify those patients, in this case, pregnant women, that will, with a certain probability, that will develop preeclampsia during the onset of their pregnancy, so that clinicians can act before symptoms occur. That is the idea of the company.
Got it. And what markets do you sell to right now? It's probably clinics, hospital, but is it everywhere in the world? And how do you approach these specific buyers?
Yes. So we sell, our target market is clinics, hospitals only. So not patients, not parents in the care of premature babies, only into hospitals. And we are actually a Swiss company. I'm based in Germany, but we are headquartered in Switzerland, and we sell into Europe as well as into the United States right now. Our first product here in Europe is CE certified, software as a medical device, whereas in the United States we are 510(k) exempt. That's very detailed, but it's a different level of regulatory. But we are selling actively in both markets, directly to hospitals. As a very small startup company, we partner with larger strategic companies that help us in marketing and selling, but the target customers are hospitals. So not patients directly, not parents directly, only clinics.
Right. And how do you actually reach out to these folks? Is it LinkedIn outreach? Is it conventions? Is it referrals? How do you get in touch with them?
All of the above. There's a small number of dedicated conferences here in Europe as well as in the United States, actually more in the United States than Europe, that are really focusing on these neonatal clinicians, neonatal nurses, neonatologists, midwives, for example, in the care. When we're talking about preeclampsia, maternal health, there are dedicated conferences for gynecologists, for obstetricians, etc., etc. So these conferences are excellent for us because with a, let's say, meaningful investment, 1 or 2 people traveling to such a conference and then having a little table and some information, we can reach hundreds of clinicians directly. That is one thing we are doing. Then, of course, LinkedIn reach out with which is limited in the case of clinicians. But as I mentioned, strategic partners that are well established in the industry and that have, for example, a direct sales force calling in the traditional way on hospitals directly, sending representatives into hospitals. Although with software, predictive analytics, the market is also changing, and this is not necessarily the best, the most efficient way of calling on such end customers. So that's why we're here today. That's why I'm super happy to be on your show. The more, social media driven online ways of marketing and reaching out to customers is certainly something that we need to get better at and that we still are learning to be efficient at and successful with.
And what's the number one challenge in your business?
The number one challenge, well, as a very small startup company, it's limited resources. That's why online means, of course, are very helpful because they leverage reach, and we don't have to travel like crazy. Yet the general understanding of what predictive analytics can do is still in its infant stages. For some, it is a black box, and people don't understand what actually is it. There's a super big hype. I tend to say there was a hype about AI and machine learning, et cetera, in medicine. It's going down a little bit at the moment because it is self-inflicted pain in the industry that we, over the last few years, set the expectations at the very, very high level. And not everybody was able to meet those expectations because some of us, and I don't want to exclude myself from making this mistake, we said we can do this, that, the other thing. And only afterwards it became obvious that, yes, we can do many things, we can predict, but it's like the hurricane forecast. There's a prediction the hurricane will have landfall tomorrow at 1 p.m. in this area. But it's still an area, it's still a prediction, and it might be not 100% accurate. And if you do that in medicine, of course, the disappointment is very, very big. But as every doctor and every drug, there's not 100% guarantee that it's 100% accurate. The drug, the painkiller for you might work, it might not work. Most likely it will work, but not 100% guaranteed. And such is predictive analytics. We cannot predict 100% exactly what's going on. So I think this, what I call self-inflicted pain, because we set the expectation very high, that's one hurdle. But then again, the understanding, what does it mean that with, let's say, 91%, your baby will develop neonatal jaundice in the next 48 hours? What exactly does it mean? And we, as the industry, still have to learn to better communicate. And our customers still have to learn how to use this, because like any other medical device, it only helps if there's a change in medical practice afterwards. The information itself doesn't do anything. Only the change in medical practice with the expected result of better medical outcome. Only that will make a change, a positive change. And I think that is the number one challenge, besides all financial and other challenges.
Is there any AI in your application to predict what will happen?
Sorry, say again.
AI, is there some AI backend stack to determine what will happen in NeoPredics?
Well, that is really difficult to say. we want to launch, and we are working actively on that, really a comprehensive platform, so that we don't have bits and pieces, but that we can eventually supply if you almost will, a dashboard of various challenges for unborn babies, pregnant women, as well as newborn babies, what can happen, so that you have a ongoing risk prediction of various diseases. That is the long-term goal. At the moment, we are building the pieces of the puzzle, and we are putting this puzzle together. So that's the plan. And again, it's almost funny, we're talking of predictive analytics, but it's very difficult to predict exactly how this will work out for a company.
Right. What is next for you? What would be a top objective? Is it funding? Is that what you need to accelerate the full process?
Yes, exactly. As the CEO of the company, my number one objective for this year is to recruit investors to come up with additional funding. We are obviously not yet at the point where we generate enough revenue to finance ourselves. So we are dependent on external funding, whether it's venture capital, whether it's family offices, or high net worth individuals, obviously also grants from governments. All of the above is welcome, and is things we are reaching out to. And in the current environment, everybody was talking during COVID times, well, next year, 2023 will get better, and was 2023, and everybody said, well, we still wait for 2024 that the funding picks up again. Now we are in 2025, and things have not yet picked up. And this is not for NeoPredics only. All of our, whether competitors or friendly companies, and I feel competition is friendly anyways. So we are all in the same boat, and everybody's struggling because investors keep their existing portfolio companies alive. And NeoPredics is very grateful and in a very lucky situation that that's exactly what our investors do. But eventually we have to come up with new investors, with new fresh capital, especially when you're scaling, and we are at the start of scaling. You need more funds, and you need new investors. So this is my number one objective, and this is, besides the product-based challenges that we just talked about, that is the number one challenge now for a company like NeoPredics, to come up with more investors to help us to get through that difficult time of scaling before there's enough commercial traction to really self-fund. I'm sorry, I can't hear you at the moment.
What's your process when it comes to innovating on the product side of things? How do you get feedback if you have so few beta testers? What insights do you integrate to your product, and how do you make sure that it fulfills the customer's need at the end?
It's exactly that. It's customer requirements. And I started my career in the corporate world, and no matter what position I was at or in, I always made a point in being as closely connected to the customer, to the end customer, to the user, because especially in the hospitals, customer actually is purchasing departments, etc., but those are not the users. When I say customers, I mean users, people that work with, whether it's medical devices, hardware that are sold for many, many years. Now it's software, but in the end, it's a product, and there's a user behind it. And I'm making sure that I'm personally as close to the user, to the end user, as somehow possible, because without any bad meaning, bad intention, that's what I'm looking for, is if there's the customer, and then there's the representative, and then there's people in the company, and then up until it ends up with me or anybody else, there's so many filters and interpretations. So I always make sure, and that's what I like in the startup industry, because we are a small company without any hierarchy, being close to the customer, reaching out to customers, talking to customers, attending conferences, going into hospitals, into the units, talking to the users and asking them what is their pain point. Exactly as you started the conversation with me, that is my very first question whenever I have the opportunity to talk to clinicians. What if you had a magic wand? And it's not my invention. One of my previous bosses taught me that always ask the question, if I had a magic wand, what could I do for you as a clinician, as my customer, to make your life easier? And if you ask that question, you get amazing answers. And this is, for me, one way to making sure that we develop products that meet customer requirements and meet that overall objective, making sure that every baby has the best possible start into life.
Right. And not so long ago, you were co-founder of VenDx. What did you learn from liquidating that company?
Yeah, first of all, I learned that only having a big dream and a vision is not good enough. It is a dedicated team and a investor basis that keeps you going, and also realizing that one day that despite having a great idea, having a great team, having investors, all of that is not yet good enough. There is a bit of luck. And when I say luck, I mean there's a bit of the right timing also involved. And if these stars don't align well, I don't want to say perfectly, but if these bits and pieces don't align well, you still can fail, despite the fact that you have investors, that you have a great idea, that you have a wonderful team, that you have a hardworking team. But if the data points don't align, then it doesn't work out. And what happened at VenDx, we ran one of the largest trials in neonatal asphyxia. That is when during the labor process, during the time a baby is being born, during labor, during birth, the brain is not supplied with enough oxygen. That was the focus on the study, and we ran one of the largest trials ever done in that specific area. And the data that came out of that showed that the biomarkers we have picked or had picked are not good enough to really meet the goal of changing clinical outcome. And at that point of time, as a startup company, having already consumed millions of euros or dollars, there was a hard stop, because we could not meet the customer requirements. We spent all of the money that the investors gave us, and despite the fact that we would have loved to continue, we had to make this painful decision to shut down the company because we were not able to meet the endpoints.
Right. Yeah, very valuable lessons here. Thanks for sharing. I also want to learn more before we go here about CCIAO, so communication, change, integrity, accountability, ownership. Why did you specifically choose each of these values?
Honestly, I just call it ciao, like the Italian word, just with a double C. It sounds nice. I just like the sound of it. And more importantly, those are the 5 values that I stand for. And ciao is my own company. It's a consulting business, and I support startup companies from Europe that want to enter the US market, or from the United States. The company is also established in the United States that want to enter the European market. I myself, I'm a dual citizen. I'm German American, so I work on both sides of the Atlantic. Those are the values that I stand for, besides this overarching mission of making sure that every baby has the best possible start into life. I truly believe that constant communication is something that we all need to do in order to be better at what we're doing, but also in business. We just talked about it. So rather over communicate than under communicate. That's the first C. The second C is change, constant change. I'm a big believer in a continuous, constant change is better than radical change where you go from one day to the next and you turn everything upside down. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes that's the only way to do it, but it's painful, as we can see in the world right now. If we constantly change / constantly learn, it's less painful, but we still accomplish a lot and we constantly get better at what we're doing. That's the second C. The I is integrity. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. There's no reading between the lines. And for me, as a consultant to other businesses, that's super important. I'm not into politics, company politics. If we have a common goal, let's go for it. No hidden agenda and all of that. A is accountability. I'm responsible for what I'm doing. And it goes along also with the O, the last letter, ownership. There's zero ownership where everybody else is responsible for my failure. And there's 100% ownership. That doesn't mean I can do it all. I can do it alone. That's not what it stands for. But I own my job, my task, my responsibility, how small or how big it might be, and I don't blame others if I'm not successful. And those 5 letters, besides the fact that I like the sound and it sounds nice, it looks nice, those are the values that I stand for, and that even if people don't know me, and maybe now after 30 minutes, you and your audience, they have a little bit of a feeling for what I stand for and the values that I try to live up for every day, sometimes more successfully, sometimes less, is a good way to introduce myself and my business ethics.
Right, love that. Thorsten, where can people find out more about you?
I have a homepage, ciao.net, CCIAO.net, or my name, thorstenwaloschek.com, just all spelled out, .com. It all leads to the same homepage. Obviously, on LinkedIn, my profile is easy to find. That's the best way to find me and to learn more about me and also to reach out to me.
That was Thorsten Waloschek and Charles Cormier.